Hey guys, welcome to another ride in the Strugglebus, where every wheel is an empty triangle. Today we're going to be talking about life, and what it means to be alive, to smell the cool mountain air. We're also going to be talking about death, and what it means to not be alive, to be mauled to death by a bear in those same mountains. Today we're going to be going over the basics of life and death, which is of vital importance in the game of Go, because it's hard to win a game if you're dying all over the place, and it's way easier to win if you're the one doing the killing. So let's jump into it. We're first going to start with what it means for a group to be alive. Then we're going to move on to basic life and death shapes. Then we're going to move on to a few shapes that are just beyond the basic shapes. We'll then discuss the importance of life and death, and then we're going to end with how to approach doing Tsumego problems. I often see a lot of questions about how to even approach doing Tsumego problems, even by some single-digit Q players. Tsumego problems are how we work on our life and death skills, though, so they're really important to do. We have a lot to go over, so let's get at it. Okay, let's go over what it means to be alive in a game of Go. If a group cannot be captured, it's considered to be alive. The most common way for a group to be alive is for it to have two eyes, which are individual, fully surrounded empty spaces within an area, like with this basic shape shown on the board. Your opponent cannot play in either of the marked spots, since it would be a self-capture, which is not allowed. And since they can't play in either spot, they'll never be able to reduce this group to 0 liberties. If you only have one eye, though, that's when you can die. Your opponent is allowed to play this move now because it reduces group to 0 liberties. Sad times. Another way that you can live is with a term called Seki, which can be shown here. Seki is an interesting situation where there are two spaces that neither player can fill, because in doing so, they will die. So black cannot fill either of those two shared liberties, nor can white fill either of the two shared liberties. So in this situation, the first person who plays in there ends up dying, so neither person plays there. And so because of that, both groups are considered alive. So again, this is called Seki, or dual life. So this is another way that we can get a group to be alive. And this is certainly much less common, though the shape that we see in the bottom left corner here is one that shows up in our games from time to time. So with that said, let's take a look at some of the basic life and death shapes. I have 8 basic life and death shapes labeled on the board. You likely recognize many of these, but maybe not all of them. Either way, let's take a look at them and their ability to make 2 eyes. And we'll start with 1 and go through 8. And 1 is pretty easy because this is the one that we already did. Black needs to play here to get 2 eyes. If black plays away, and then white is allowed to play here, black has been reduced and only has 1 eye and will eventually die there. The second group is pretty similar. If black is allowed to play here, then he's got 3 eyes, and if he allows white to play here, then he's going to be reduced to 1 eye. Also worth noting, if black plays anywhere else in here, he's going to create that 3 shape, and white can hit the center of it and reduce it to 1 eye. So if black is playing here, he needs to play there to live, and white can play there to die. Looking at 3, this is pretty much the same thing as 1, is just not in the corner. Black again needs to play in the center, and he will have his 2 eyes. If he plays away and lets white play there, then white will kill that. Now we start getting into ones that are maybe a little less easy to see, and so we can take a look at 4. Here, if black plays O19, then he's got 2 eyes. Or if he plays N19, he's got 2 eyes. So in this situation, he can actually play away, because if white plays one, black plays the other, and he will always have 2 eyes. So this shape, this fully surrounded shape of 4 points, is alive for black. Taking a look at number 5, this is a very well-known shape called the bulky 5. And in this case, black needs to play G19 to be alive. If he plays away and allows white to play G19, there's no way to get a second eye, and this group is going to be fully dead. It's worth noting that if black plays H19 or F18, he's going to create another dead shape. If he plays here, this is another 4 that's bent. This one's going to be alive for the same reason that black can play either F19 or G19, similar to this one over here. So if white plays here, black can play here, or vice versa. If white plays here, black can play here, and he'll get his 2 eyes. Looking at number 6, in this situation, there's actually no way to save these stones. The best black can do, doesn't matter where he plays, is going to create this shape of 3 again, and white can play in the center and knock it down to 1 eye. So in this case, this is a dead shape. Looking at 7, in this situation, this is already alive and black does not need to do anything because if he plays away, the best white can try is probably playing one of these 2 points, and if white plays one, black plays the other. And if white extends, black extends the other way, and white can now play neither of these 2 moves because they are both independent eyes. And the same thing here, if white plays here instead, black plays the other important point. White will extend, and black can extend here, and he's fully alive. And the last shape is number 8. And we're actually going to save this one for later, because right now you're looking at it and going, well, we just discussed what this 2x3 shape did, and this is a 2x3 shape, so it's obviously the same thing. But it actually isn't. And before we get onto that, I want to go over an important term, and that is the vital point. So I'm sure you recognized that in all these shapes, there seem to be these really important spots that you needed to play. Like whenever we've got 3, we need to play in the center. Or we have this 4, we need to play in the center. Or when we've got this bulky 5, we need to play this point here. These are all called vital points. So a lot of these life and death shapes, they have vital points. And those are typically what you want to be mindful of. In cases of independently alive groups, like group number 4 and group number 7, they both have 2 vital points. And your opponent isn't going to be able to get both of them. If they play one, you play the other. But this term is going to come back later into this video. Okay, so we've gone over the basic shapes of life and death. I want to show a few more advanced shapes that are also important to know. Let's start with the one that we skipped from earlier, which is now in the bottom right-hand corner. So we discussed that there are vital points in shapes and that this 2x3 has 2 vital points. So you'd think that if white plays one, black plays the other, and we're all set. There's a key difference here, though, than when this shape is on the edge. And that difference is that T1, in this case, is not a liberty for black. And the fact that that liberty is missing changes everything. If black ignores this and allows white to play here, and then black plays his other typical move, when white extends here and black plays this, he actually dies because T1 isn't a liberty. So in this case, black can't approach here to create 2 eyes because he doesn't have the T1 liberty. So don't be tricked by the fact that this looks like a living shape, because if it's on the edge or in the center of the board, it is living. But specifically when it's in the corner, it's dead. The next really important shape to know is what we refer to as the L shape. In this case, even if it's black's turn, black cannot live here. This is a dead group. It does not matter where black plays. And you can play around with that on your own to see just how that works. But you will find that no matter where black plays, white is going to be able to kill him. So just as a simple example, you could think this looks like a pretty good place to play. But then white can play here, and black blocks, and white extends. And if black plays here, white plays this, which will end up killing the group. Or if black plays here, white plays here, and now there's only 1 eye. And so that's just one example, but I promise you it doesn't matter where black plays right now. This shape is dead. Probably the trickiest shape that you're going to deal with for a while is what we refer to as the bent 4 in the corner. And I have 2 versions of it in the top left and top right corner. This is the same shape. And you're looking at this and going, this is easy, this is Seki. Right? Black clearly can't play here because then white captures, and white clearly can't play here because then black captures. And so this looks like a classic definition of Seki. The issue is that it isn't Seki. It's true that black cannot approach either of these points because then he'll die. What isn't true, though, is white can approach. When black takes, white can play here, and to try to get 2 eyes, black has to play here, but then it's ko. And what's interesting is, I mentioned black can't play either of these 2 moves, but white can do this whenever he wants, including at the end of the game, after he has fixed every single one of his ko-threats. And so in that case, when there are no more ko-threats on the board, white plays here, black captures, white plays here, black plays here, white captures and starts the ko, but there are no ko-threats. So the best black can do is pass, and then white captures. And in this case, you don't actually have to fill in all your ko-threats. This shape is dead as it stands. That is true for Japanese rules, it's true for Chinese rules. At least in Chinese scoring, you don't lose anything for filling in all of your co-threads, but in Japanese scoring you would, which is why with Japanese rules, it just says this shape is dead. So that is true for both of these because it's the same exact shape in the top right as well, where we can create this ko. So very important shape to know, and unfortunately a lot of people don't know this shape when they first start off. And if you know it and they don't, sometimes it gets really frustrating as you try to convince your opponent that no, for real, this top right corner is actually dead. And getting back to the L shape for a little bit, this one is also really important to know because there could be situations where white just played this stone and black doesn't have this stone on the board. And if black doesn't know this shape and plays here, then he's just committed the greatest sin of the game, and that is dying in Gote. Whatever you do not die in Gote. If you're taking one thing away from this video, it needs to be this: do not die in Gote. But this is a shape where it happens a lot if people don't know the shape. If black plays b3 here, and white knows that this is dead, then you just died in Gote, and white gets to play somewhere else. If white also doesn't know the shape, then maybe you'll have tricked him and he'll play here and black will realize he's dead and play somewhere else. But as you start getting stronger and you play this move, your opponent's going to recognize that this is already dead, and they're going to take their Tsunuki. Before we jump into Tsumego, I want to mention why this stuff is important. I mean, we obviously understand why this is important. You want to make sure that your groups are alive. Just as important, though, is being able to figure out if you need to play one more move to live or if you can Tsunuki. Can you play somewhere else, or will your group die if you do? That is why Tsumego is so important. Looking at this board, it's white's turn. Can white play away here, or does his group die if he does? Because man, there's some really big moves on this board that white really wants to play. But if he loses the c14 group, he likely loses this game. So what to do? Tsunuki and risk losing the group, or play one more stone to make sure you're alive and potentially lose momentum that you need to stay in this game? So that's your question for this video. You're white. Where are you playing here? Let me know in the comments. I have a second example of this that interestingly showed up today right before I started recording this video. So not that the other examples weren't, but this one was taken from an actual game. So in this situation, it's white's turn. And this game's really, really close. It's going to come down to just a few points. And so can white afford to play away here and get the last point at a12? Or does he need to play one more move in this group, potentially s12, to stay alive? Because if he plays s12, he ends up losing that point, and he ends up losing the a12 point, because black will get it, and a13 will turn into a point. So it's actually a 2-point difference, and this game's really close. Those 2 points might matter. So what does white do here? Does he play one more move, or does he go take the point elsewhere? So this is your second question for the video, and this one's a little easier than the last one. If you're white here, where are you playing? Are you playing s12 to make sure you're 100% alive? Or are you playing a12 so that you can get 2 more points? Also, let me know in the comments. A couple more things before we get into Tsumego strategies. I really want to point out this common mistake that happens, because it happens all the time. It's the first line Hane. Before we get into that, though, we need to go over a term that's called eye space. So as I mentioned, as you're already aware by now, for a group to be alive, we need to be able to get 2 eyes. There's a term that we use when we try to get more area to create those 2 eyes, and it's called eye space. And so it's really important when you're trying to live, or if you're trying to kill, to either expand your eye space or decrease your opponent's eye space so they have less room to make eyes, or for you, you've got more room to make eyes. Because the more room that you have to make eyes, the more successful you're going to be to actually get your 2 eyes to be alive. And the less room you have, then obviously the tougher it's going to be. So there are some situations where you just have to take a move to increase your eye space to make sure you're alive. And again, a very common mistake is in this situation where black, kind of looks alive maybe, but it's a little tough. And so black goes, well, I'm going to expand my eye space, and he plays the Hane on the first line. Because he thinks, hey, this is just like descending, except we get the benefit of, hey, even getting it in sensei, right? And so this is a great thing. Except, unfortunately, it isn't the same as descending. So actually, when we play this Hane, at best, we still have to play N1 after the Atari. But at worst, white can throw in here which is a very common strategy. And now when we capture, we actually have less eye space than if we had just played N1. Kind of weird how that works, huh? In this case, though, unfortunately, since this doesn't expand your eye space at all, white can play the actual move to kill, which is this. And this is a tricky sequence to see out, and I'm not going to go through it all. But J1 does kill in this situation. And if black had just played here, or any number of other moves to try to get more eyes in here, then all of a sudden black's group is alive. But he got greedy, thought that he could get more out of this, not realizing that this doesn't actually expand his eye space at all, and he died. So with that out of the way, let's get going on some Tsumego. So Tsumego, huh? They are frustrating and you hate them. Me too. I'm right there with you. Or you don't even know where to start with them, which frustrates you and makes you hate them. Let's change that, huh? Let's go over the basic strategies for doing Tsumego and trying to kill a group in your games. So we'll lay this out in some steps. Step 1, see if there's a dead shape forming inside your opponent's group. Step 2, surround them and try to force them towards that dead shape. Step 3, reduce their eye space to force them to the dead shape. Step 4, hit the vital spot. Step 5, do a happy dance. Especially in your games, doing it in that order is really important. If you try to kill them directly without first surrounding them and they break out, that's going to be a failure. If you surround them first and then fail to kill them, though, that's often not a failure, because if nothing else, you surrounded them in Sente, and that's often enough of a victory. So surround them first, then try to reduce their eye space, then proceed with the killing. Let's go through some basic Tsumego to show you how I approach them following the rules that I've listed. So we already have the first one up, and the steps are the same regardless if you're trying to kill or live. And so in this situation, we are playing as black, and all of these will be playing as black. So step 1, see if there's a dead shape forming inside your group. Yeah, there sure is. We already have the bulky 5. And step 2 says that, if white's trying to kill, that he's going to try to surround us first. And step 3 is reduce our eye space. And then step 4, hit the vital point. In this case, they've already fully surrounded us. They've already reduced their eye spaces as well as they can. So they're going to hit the vital point. So we have to do that first. So we play here because that's the vital point. And now we play here and we've got 2 eyes. So let's take a look at the next one. So again, we are playing as black. So let's go through the steps. See if there's a dead shape forming inside of your opponent's group. Well, it looks like we kind of already started with the bulky 5 and they played the vital point. And so step 2 is surround them, which we've already done. And step 3 is reduce their eye space to form them into a dead shape. Well, it looks like they've kind of got 2 eyes forming. But if we hit right here, then we end up actually reducing eye space because we put these 2 stones in Atari. And now we can hit the other eye. And white is now dead. So let's take a look at the next example. So this one's obviously a little different than the first 2 we did. So let's go through the rules. Step 1, see if there's a dead shape forming inside of your opponent's group. Do you guys see the dead shape forming? It's one of the advanced ones that we talked about. The L in the corner. If we push here and white blocks, then he forms the L in the corner and he's dead. So let's force him into that shape. We play here, and Tsumego already says, yep, you've got it. They don't even play it. But if white plays here, where does black play now? Where are the vital points? If you answered black can Tanuki, congratulations. White just died in Gote. He committed the sin. Never die in Gote. Okay, let's take a look at the next one. This one's probably the first one that just really truly follows the rules. So step 1, see if there's a dead shape forming inside your opponent's group. It's hard to tell, right? But it's clear that he's got some form of line here. But maybe if we force him into just having 3 spots, then we can play the vital point. So step 1 is see if there's a shape in there, and maybe. Step 2 is surround them and try to force them towards that shape. Well, they're already surrounded, and so step 3 is reduce their eye space. And we've got a really good strategy for that, and that is Haneing on the first line. And you might be thinking like, hey, didn't you say don't Hane on the first line? Well, I said that not to increase your eye space. It does a great job of reducing eye space, though. So we play here, and that's reduced his eye space. Now let's Hane on the other side, and that reduces his eye space. And oh, look at that. We've got that shape that we saw earlier, and now we hit the vital point. And it's worth noting, it doesn't matter if white plays here, because this is a false eye. It doesn't matter if white plays here, because it's a false eye. So white is dead here. let's take a look at our second to last example now. And this one's an interesting one because the answer really just comes from step one, which is see if there's a dead shape forming inside. And there is. White's really close to forming that bulky 5. If he forms the bulky 5 and we capture it, we'll capture those 5 stones, but the space that's left behind will be the bulky 5, and we know we die if that happens. So we can't let White make the bulky 5. So the answer is actually quite simple on this one. Stop White from making the bulky 5. We play here. White can capture, but then we get to play here. And we will capture this, and we will be alive. If we had instead played here, White gets to make the bulky 5. We capture, but then White kills. So this was just recognizing the shape that could kill us and avoiding that. So let's take a look at the final example that I have for you today. I saved this one for the end because it's only possible because White committed the sin of the Hane in the first line. If he had just played here, then he would have turned this into an eye. But unfortunately, because he did this, he didn't. So let's go through the steps. Do we see a dead shape forming inside? Well, in this case, we see a living shape forming inside. Obviously, if White plays here, he's already going to have 2 eyes. So we see the shape, and we've got him fully surrounded. So let's see if we can reduce the eye space. Well, if we play here, White's going to capture, but now this is only 1 eye. And because White played the Hane in the first line, we can actually poke out the eye by playing here and then throwing in again. And White can capture, but this is a false eye, and White is dead. So again, remember guys, don't play a Hane in the first line if you're looking to get more eye space, because it doesn't actually get you any more eye space. So that's it. Those are the basics of life and death and how to approach doing Tsumego. And hopefully this has been helpful for you guys. At least now you've got steps that you can approach when looking at a life and death problem in your own game or when you're doing Tsumego. So now you can go get on with your living and breathing that cool mountain air. Or you can get on with your killing and be a bear and maul your opponents to death. Either way, I hope you enjoyed it. Thanks for coming out for another ride in Strugglebus, where every wheel's an empty triangle. One more thing before I let you guys go. I have set something up to make it easier for you guys to reach out to me if you're looking to get lessons and or game reviews. I have set up a Patreon, which has a few membership tiers that are pretty much just getting lessons and game reviews. And I've set it up to be really affordable enough that Patreon was like, hey, you should probably charge more than you're charging. But that's pretty much just because they want their money. But either way, take a look at it. It's a good way to give back to the channel. But you don't need to if you don't want to. Just watching the videos is enough. Anyway, have a good one, guys.